What if I told you that at the very moment Jesus was on the cross, it wasn't just soldiers watching, but two angels, Michael and Uriel, were waging a secret battle against Lucifer? Few people know, but this confrontation decided the fate of humanity. Want to see how it happened? Today you will see the cross of Jesus from a perspective you may never have imagined. Because while everyone stared at a bloodied man in silence, in the spiritual world, Michael and Uriel were waging a war unseen by human eyes. Few people talk about it, but it's in the scriptures. And when you discover what really happened at Calvary, you'll understand why this secret was hidden for centuries. So sign up now, because here we reveal what no one has the courage to tell. That afternoon, as Jesus hung on the cross, the sky seemed utterly silent. There was no thunder, no audible heavenly voices, just an emptiness that weighed heavily on everyone. This silence was not God's carelessness, but part of an invisible command. In the Bible, even God's silence carries strategy. Think of a father watching his child take his first steps. He doesn't rush to catch every stumble because he trusts the process. So it was with Jesus. The Father's silence wasn't abandonment, but trust in a perfect plan. Calvary was a stage, and the silence was the curtain that hid the real battle. It's easy to confuse silence with absence. How many times have you prayed, asked for answers, and only heard emptiness? Many people give up at this point, but the cross shows that silence can be preparation for the greatest revelation. What seems like a lack of response can actually be the beginning of a strategic victory. But that's not the most profound detail. Because while the silence echoed across the earth, another celestial sign began to manifest itself, a phenomenon so strange that it still puzzles Bible scholars today. And that's where we come to the next point. At noon, when the sun should have shone at its fullest, a supernatural darkness covered the earth. It was no ordinary eclipse. It lasted 3 hours, something impossible by natural standards. The Bible shows that this phenomenon was a spiritual sign, a veil of darkness announcing that the unseen world was at war. Think about when the power suddenly goes out in your house. You don't see anything, but you know something is broken in the system. This was the case at Calvary. The darkness was no coincidence, but a message that spiritual forces were at work. The heavens were declaring, something cosmic is happening here. In life, we also face moments when the light goes out, grief, loss, crises that leave us without direction. But the cross teaches us that even in the deepest darkness, there is a hidden purpose. Jesus, silence, and the darkened sky were signs that victory was being forged in secret. And the most impressive thing is that men saw only darkness, but the heavens witnessed something far greater. Because behind that black curtain, the invisible war that would change the history of humanity began. And it is precisely about this veiled battle that we will now discuss. While the Roman soldiers played dice at the foot of the cross and mocked Jesus, what human eyes saw was just an ordinary condemned man. Calvary seemed a spectacle of defeat, a man nailed to wood, bleeding and abandoned. But that was only the surface. What no one saw was the movement in the spiritual world. The Bible reveals that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. At that moment, Golgotha was more than a place of execution. It was a cosmic battlefield. Lucifer surrounded the scene, believing he had won. But above the human mockery, Michael and Uriel were already positioned in strategic silence. It's like watching a play without realizing that the real plot is unfolding behind the scenes. While the audience gazes at the stage, the strings, lights, and effects are manipulated by invisible hands. This is what happened at Calvary. Men saw only a suffering body, but in the invisible, a spiritual operation was underway, and this operation had designated generals, Michael, the fiery warrior, and Uriel, the angel of revelation. They were there not as spectators, but as active agents of divine order. But before we understand Uriel's role, we need to take a closer look at the presence of Michael, the war general who defended the legality of the cross. Imagine Michael, the archangel described in Daniel and Revelation, descending onto the scene of Calvary, not as a mere spectator, but as a war commander. His armor shone like fire, and in his hands was a sword engraved with the names of God. He was not there to interfere with the cross, but to ensure that no heavenly decree was violated. In the Bible, Michael is presented as the defender of God's people, the one who fights against the dragon and his angels. On Calvary, his mission was to protect the legality of the sacrifice. He was like a military officer, ensuring that the signature of a treaty is not corrupted. He maintained order so that Jesus' victory would be indisputable before the universe. In practical life, Michael symbolizes the spiritual protection that protects us when we face invisible battles. How many times have we gone through struggles that seemed to destroy us, but something inexplicable sustained us? This something is divine action on our behalf, often invisible but real, as on Calvary. And if Michael was the warrior who defended the law, there was another angel who illuminated the mysteries hidden in that scene. Because beside Michael's sword, the light of Uriel's revelation shone, and it is about him that we will speak next. Few know Uriel, but his presence in biblical tradition is shrouded in light and mystery. His name means fire of God, or God is my light. At Calvary, he appears not as a warrior, but as the guardian of revelation, the one who illuminates the hidden meaning of the cross. If Michael was the sword, Uriel was the lamp that showed the way. While Michael maintained the order of battle, Uriel revealed the eternal meaning of what was happening. He was like someone holding a flashlight in a dark tunnel, showing that pain is not the end, but part of the journey. Uriel's mission was to ensure that Jesus' victory was not only legal, but also understood on a spiritual level. In practice, Uriel reminds us of the moments when we finally understand the why of certain pains. Years of suffering can suddenly gain meaning when the light of revelation touches our hearts. It is that spiritual clarity that transforms tears into testimony. This is what happened at Calvary. Pain was illuminated by revelation, but that's not the most profound detail, because Jesus didn't just suffer in silence. His words on the cross carried spiritual codes. And in the next section, we'll uncover how Jesus' cry was actually an invisible command that sealed the greatest victory in history. When Jesus cried out, "Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani," many thought it was a cry of defeat. But in the spiritual dimension, it was like a military password. It wasn't despair, it was a code. These words echoed like a decree authorizing the transfer of authority over life and death. It was the invisible command of the cross. Michael, as the general of legality, was there to ensure this order was carried out before heaven and hell. Uriel, as guardian of revelation, illuminated the meaning so that future generations would understand that it was not abandonment, but strategy. Silence and clamor together formed the password that opened the eternal portals. Consider how, in certain wars, a simple signal or raised flag changes the entire army's movement. It was like that on Calvary. A cry that seemed like weakness was, in fact, the trigger for the greatest spiritual operation in history. Where there was darkness, the decree began to shine like fire in the invisible. But that's not the most surprising detail, because at the same time the password was released, something physical happened that symbolized the fall of all barriers, a sign so powerful that it still echoes today as proof that the cross wasn't a defeat. And that's exactly what we're going to see now. The moment Jesus gave up his spirit, the veil of the temple was torn from top to bottom. It was not the work of human hands, it was an act of God. This veil separated the holy place from the most holy, God's presence from ordinary people. When it tore, it was as if the heavens declared, "The barrier has ended, access is open." This tearing was not merely symbolic. In Jewish tradition, the veil represented the distance imposed by sin. Only the high priest once a year could pass through that curtain. Now, with Jesus' death, the way was clear for all. What was once the privilege of one became the right of many. In practical life, how often do we build walls that separate us from God, guilt from the past, fears of the future, religiosity that suffocates faith? The torn veil reminds us that no barrier is strong enough to prevent God's love from reaching those who believe. When He opens access, not even hell can close it. But that wasn't all. For as the veil tore on earth, Jesus Himself descended into a dark and mysterious place, Sheol, the realm of the dead. And it is there, in the realm of darkness, that an even deeper secret begins to be revealed. After giving up His spirit, Jesus didn't simply sleep. The Bible reveals that He descended into Sheol, the realm of the dead. This place, in Hebrew tradition, was divided. On one side, Abraham's bosom, the rest of the righteous. On the other, the abyss of torment. Jesus traversed this dark territory not as a prisoner, but as a conqueror. Think of Sheol as a maximum security prison. No man could leave on his own. But when Christ entered, it was different. He didn't enter in shackles. He entered as one with authority. The darkness trembled, because for the first time someone was entering its gates with a mission to conquer it from within. This shows us that Jesus' victory was not only on the cross, but also in the invisible realms. He invaded the realm of death, faced the darkness, and emerged bringing hope. In practice, this means that even in the darkest areas of our lives, God can enter and transform. Nothing is too deep for His light to reach. But the most memorable moment was yet to come, because the descent into Sheol wasn't just a visit. It was the stage where the keys were transferred, an act that sealed the eternal victory over death. And that's the next mystery we need to unravel. In the heart of Sheol, something extraordinary happened. Psalm 24 echoes like a spiritual password. Lift up your heads, O ye gates, be ye lifted up, O ye everlasting doors, that the King of glory may come in. It was the announcement of Jesus' arrival. He who had seemed defeated on the cross now demanded passage as the victorious king. At that moment, the scene shifts. Michael, as a war officer, stands ready to ensure the legality of the victory is upheld. Uriel, with the light of revelation, illuminates the eternal meaning of that moment. Together, they witness the greatest shift in authority in history. The keys of death and hell are being removed from Lucifer's hands. It's as if a jailer suddenly lost his power over the cells. What had once been an eternal prison was now under new management. Christ took possession of the keys and, with that, sealed the enemy's defeat forever. What seemed like the end became the inauguration of a new era of hope. But this wasn't just a distant cosmic act. This moment has a direct impact on your life and mine. Because victory in Sheol isn't in the past. It manifests itself in every silence, in every pain, in every apparent defeat that God transforms into triumph. And it's precisely this personal impact that we're going to talk about now. What happened at Calvary wasn't just distant history. Every detail, the silence, the darkness, the descent into Sheol, the handing over of the keys, points to how God also works in our lives. Jesus' silence wasn't a defeat, but a strategic command. This means your silence can carry more victory than you can imagine. How many times have you faced situations where there seemed to be no answer? The sky was silent, the darkness all around, your heart filled with questions. These moments make us think God has abandoned us. But the cross shows otherwise. Silence can be a disguise for a spiritual operation underway. Just as Michael defended legality and Uriel illuminated revelation, God still sends signs and protection when you go through dark days. Even when you don't understand, there are angels on the move and a plan being executed. Faith leads us to trust that the absence of noise does not mean the absence of God. And here's the point. The same Jesus who conquered in the silence of the cross is the one who transforms his silence into victory. But that's not the end of our reflection. Because now we need to return to the big question. Why were Michael and Uriel on the cross? And what does that mean for us today? This is where we arrive at the final revelation. Now everything makes sense. The silence, the darkness, the descent into Sheol, Michael guarding the law, and Uriel illuminating the revelation. They were there because the cross wasn't just death. It was the execution of a cosmic plan before angels and demons. Calvary was both a tribunal and a battlefield, and Jesus won both. The sky darkened because creation recognized the gravity of the moment. Michael stood as general to ensure nothing was corrupted. Uriel shone so that the eternal meaning would not be lost. And Lucifer, who thought he was winning, saw his own defeat sealed before his eyes. The cross was silence on earth, but a cry of victory in heaven. And what does this mean for you? That the same God who commanded Michael and Uriel in that moment still moves heaven and angels for you. Your silence may hide the greatest victory of your life. When you feel trapped, He is already opening the doors. When all seems lost, He is already transferring the keys. Now I want to know, which part of this mystery impacted you most? Jesus, silence, the descent into Sheol, or Michael guarding the transfer of the keys? Write in the comments, because your insight might awaken someone who is currently silent. If this content has opened your eyes to something you had never realized, subscribe now and activate the bell, because we still have many revelations hidden in the scriptures that no one talks about. Leave your comment. Which part touched you most? Jesus' silence, the descent into Sheol, or Michael guarding the transfer of the keys? I'll read each of them, because your insight might help someone experiencing this silence right now. And don't leave yet. Here on the final screen you will find the next video, The Forbidden Secret, what the angel saw when Jesus died on the cross. It is the direct continuation of this message and will further deepen the mystery of Calvary.